The train station was busy that evening. People walked quickly, some carrying heavy bags, some holding hands with children, some waiting for trains to arrive. The noise of footsteps, voices, and whistles filled the air. In the middle of that restless crowd sat a young woman, dressed in white. Her gown was wrinkled, the hem dirty from walking on the streets, but anyone could see that it had once been a wedding dress. She sat on a wooden bench near the corner, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her head bent low as if she wanted to disappear. She had not planned to be here like this. That morning she had woken up with dreams of a new life. She had imagined standing beside her groom, exchanging vows, beginning a journey that every girl hoped would be filled with joy. But instead, she had walked away from the ceremony with nothing but pain. The man who promised to be her husband had turned away at the last moment, his words cutting deeper than any knife. "I cannot do this," he had said, and those words echoed in her ears even now. Her family's faces flashed in her memory. The relatives, the neighbors, the people who had come to witness her happiness, all had watched in shock when the groom left. Some had whispered, some had shaken their heads, and some had quietly left the place. No one looked at her with comfort. They looked at her with pity, and pity was harder to bear than anger. She had slipped away quietly, unable to face anyone, and now she found herself at this station not knowing where else to go. Tears rolled down her cheeks, though she tried to hide them by turning her face away. A few passers-by glanced at her curiously. Some seemed to guess her story from her clothes, but none stopped. To them she was just another sad face in a world already full of worries. She felt invisible and yet exposed at the same time. Her thoughts were heavy. She wondered what would happen next. Where would she go? How would she face her parents? They had trusted that this marriage would give her security and a family of her own. Instead, it had ended in humiliation. She thought of returning home, but she feared the questions, the stares, the endless gossip that would spread through the neighborhood. She thought of leaving for another city, starting fresh, but with what? She had no money, no bag, not even a change of clothes. All she had was the white dress, which now felt like a cruel reminder of promises that were never kept. As she sat lost in these thoughts, she did not notice the man walking past her with two small children. The twins, a boy and a girl of about 6 years old, clutched his hands on either side. The boy carried a toy car, the girl a little rag doll. Their faces were bright with the innocence of childhood, and their questions tumbled out one after another, as children's questions often do. "Papa, when will the train come?" the boy asked, tugging at his father's sleeve. "Papa, can I get a sweet from that shop?" the girl asked, pointing to a stall nearby. The father, a tall man with a tired but kind face, smiled gently as he tried to answer both at once. His voice was calm, patient. It was clear he was used to their chatter and loved it. Then the children noticed the young woman in white. The girl stopped in her tracks and whispered loudly, "Papa, why is the lady crying?" Her innocent voice carried in the air, and the young woman quickly wiped her face, embarrassed. She turned away, pretending not to hear. The man looked at her for the first time. His steps slowed. There was something about her that caught his attention. Not just the gown, but the deep sadness in her eyes. He hesitated, not wanting to intrude, but the twins' questions continued. "Did someone hurt her, Papa?" the little boy asked. "Maybe she lost her way," the girl added softly. The man glanced down at them and then back at the young woman. He felt a tug in his heart. He knew pain when he saw it. His own life had not been easy, and he understood what it was like to carry sorrow silently. For a moment he considered walking past. After all, she was a stranger, but something inside him told him not to. He guided the children to sit on the empty part of the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them and the young woman. She stiffened at first, not wanting company, but she did not move away. The man did not speak immediately. He simply sat, letting the children settle. They played quietly with their toys, though they still stole curious glances at her. The silence stretched, broken only by the sounds of trains and announcements. Finally, the man spoke, his voice gentle. "Are you all right, miss?" She did not answer. She kept her eyes on the floor, afraid that if she opened her mouth she would break down completely. "You don't have to tell me anything," he added quickly. "But sometimes, it helps to know someone is willing to listen." His words were simple, without pity, without judgment. Something in his tone made her look up. Their eyes met for a brief moment. His were steady, kind, carrying no curiosity, only quiet concern. She saw the children beside him, The way they leaned against him comfortably, trusting him completely. She wondered what kind of man he was, caring for two little ones on his own. She finally whispered, her voice trembling, "I was supposed to get married today." The man nodded slowly as if he already understood. He did not ask for details. He did not ask why she was here or what had gone wrong. He just sat in silence, giving her space. The children listened, too young to fully understand but old enough to sense sadness. The little girl reached out and touched the woman's hand softly, in the way children do when they want to comfort someone. The woman almost pulled away, but then she felt the warmth of the tiny hand and let it stay. It was the first kind touch she had felt all day. Her tears returned, but this time they were quieter. She whispered again, almost to herself, "He left me." The man closed his eyes for a moment, his heart heavy for her. He did not know her story, but he knew the pain of loss. His wife had passed away years ago, leaving him with the twins. He had struggled since then, trying to be both father and mother, never letting his children feel the emptiness that lived inside him. Looking at this young woman, he saw not just her sorrow but also a reflection of his own past grief. The station continued to buzz around them, but for a while it felt like time slowed down. A rejected bride sat on one side, a widowed father with his twins on the other, and between them hung an unspoken understanding, two souls who knew the weight of loneliness. She did not know why, but she felt lighter after speaking those few words to him. Perhaps it was because he had not reacted with shock or pity. Perhaps it was because he simply listened, as if her pain deserved space. She sat quietly, the noise of the trains fading into the background, and for the first time since morning, she felt she was not completely alone. The woman sat quietly on the station bench, her wedding dress still clinging to her like an unwanted memory. The man with the twins had not asked her to speak more, but his silence felt safe. She noticed the way his children stayed close to him, the way they trusted his presence completely. It reminded her of what she had just lost, the hope of building her own family, the dream of being cared for and belonging somewhere. That dream had broken in a single afternoon. The man finally spoke again, his voice calm. "It must be very hard," she gave a faint nod. Words were still difficult, yet the gentleness in his tone made her want to share more. It had been hours since anyone had spoken to her without pity or gossip. She whispered, "Everyone left. Even the people who came to bless me. They looked at me as if I had done something wrong." The man listened, his eyes steady, his hands resting on the twins' shoulders. He did not interrupt, and that silence gave her strength to continue. "They said he changed his mind," she said, the bitterness rising in her throat. "They said I was not good enough. He walked away while everyone watched, and now I don't know what I am supposed to do. Where am I supposed to go?" Her voice cracked, and she pressed her hands against her face. The twins watched, their eyes wide with innocence. The little boy leaned closer to his father and asked softly, "Papa, why is she so sad?" The father bent down and answered in a low whisper, "Because someone was unkind to her. Sometimes people hurt others without reason." The boy frowned as if he could not understand how anyone could hurt such a gentle woman. The little girl holding her doll slowly stood and walked closer. She tugged gently at the woman's sleeve. "Don't cry," the girl said. "My mama also cried a lot before she went to the stars." The woman froze, surprised by the child's words. She lowered her hands from her face and looked at the little girl. "Your mama?" she asked softly. The man nodded quietly. "Their mother passed away 3 years ago." The woman felt her heart squeeze. She looked at the man, really seeing him now. His face carried the marks of long days of responsibility, but his eyes had a depth of patience. She understood now why he had spoken with such calmness. He knew pain too. His life had not been free of loss. The girl smiled gently, her innocence shining through. "Papa says crying is okay, but after crying we must stand up and smile again." She placed her small doll in the woman's lap as if offering comfort. The woman's tears spilled again, but this time they were softer, mixed with gratitude. She held the doll carefully, touched by the simple kindness of a child she had never met before. The man gave his daughter a tender look. "Come, let the lady rest," he said gently, but the woman shook her head. "It's all right," she whispered. "She reminds me that maybe I'm not completely lost." The twins leaned closer, curious and innocent, asking questions only children dare to ask. "Were you going to marry today?" the boy asked. She nodded. But he left you? The girl continued. The woman gave a sad smile. Yes, he left me. The children frowned, their young minds unable to accept such cruelty. That was wrong, the boy said firmly. The girl added, if someone promises, they should keep it. Their words, though simple, filled the woman with warmth. No one else had said that to her. Everyone else had only looked at her with pity. These little children spoke with honesty, and it felt like a small piece of healing. The man noticed the change in her face. Though her eyes were still heavy, there was a faint light now, sparked by the children's innocence. He decided not to let the moment pass. You know, he said softly, sometimes life takes away what we expect, but it also gives us what we never imagined. The woman looked at him, unsure what he meant. But she could feel his words carried more than comfort. They carried experience. The twins began to play near the bench, racing the toy car and making little sounds of laughter. The woman watched them, and for the first time since her rejection, she smiled faintly. The sound of their giggles broke the heavy silence that had weighed on her all day. She thought to herself how strange it was that in the middle of a crowded station after being abandoned, she could still find a reason to smile. The man spoke again, his voice low so only she could hear. I know what loneliness feels like. I know how it burns inside, how it makes you question your worth, but I also know that love can return in ways we do not expect. His words touched something deep inside her. She wanted to ask more, but she was afraid of opening her heart again so soon, so she simply listened. The evening sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow through the glass roof of the station. People hurried past, trains arrived and departed. And yet for the woman, the world felt smaller, as if only this man and his children existed around her. She began to speak again, this time more freely. She told him about her dreams of marriage, about how she had trusted a man who promised her a life together. She explained how her family had celebrated, how she had believed her future was secure, and how in one cruel moment it had all shattered. The man did not try to comfort her with false hope. He simply nodded, listening, allowing her pain to pour out. When she paused, he said quietly, "It was not your fault. Sometimes people show their true faces too late, but better late than never. You deserve better than someone who could not stand beside you." Her throat tightened with emotion. No one had said those words to her yet. Everyone else had whispered about shame, about gossip, about what society would say. No one had reminded her that she deserved more. She lowered her eyes, afraid that if she looked at him too long, she would break down again. The twins ran back to them, laughing, showing the toy car that had rolled all the way under the bench. The woman smiled softly and patted their heads. For a brief moment, she felt like she belonged. The children accepted her without question, and the man did not judge her. She wondered if life was trying to tell her something. The man noticed the way she looked at the children, the way her hands trembled slightly when she touched their hair. He thought to himself that maybe fate had placed them together for a reason. He had prayed many nights for someone kind enough to care for his twins, someone gentle enough to give them love like their mother once did. And here before him sat a woman who had been abandoned but still carried kindness in her eyes. The woman looked at the little girl's doll still resting in her lap. She clutched it softly, realizing that sometimes strangers could show more compassion than those closest to us. She whispered almost to herself, "Maybe I can stand up again." The man's gaze softened. "Yes," he said quietly. "You can." The station clock ticked on. The world moved quickly, but around that small bench a new story was beginning, one that none of them had expected. The rejected bride, the widowed father, and his two innocent twins were no longer strangers. Something invisible had connected them, something that felt like the first step toward a new path. The sound of the trains came and went, but on that bench in the corner of the station, time seemed slower. The young woman still held the little doll in her lap, the gift of comfort from the small girl. The man watched her quietly, thinking carefully about his next words. He was not a man who spoke without meaning. He had lived enough years to know the weight of every sentence, and now, with this woman beside him, he felt a strange stirring inside his heart. The children continued to play, their laughter rising and falling like music between moments of silence. Their voices filled the space with a warmth that the woman had not felt all day. She smiled faintly as she watched them chase after their toy car, and giggle when it slipped under the bench again. She felt for the first time since the morning that maybe the world had not ended after all. The man leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice so that his words reached only her. I know you don't know me. I know you have just faced something no one should ever face. But as I look at you, I see more than your pain. I see someone my children need. The woman turned her head sharply, her eyes wide in confusion. She thought she had misheard him. What? She whispered. He looked at her with steady eyes, his voice firm yet kind. Please come with me. My twins need a mother like you. The words fell between them like a stone dropped into water, sending ripples through her heart. She froze, her hands tightening around the doll. A part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. How could a stranger say something so bold? And yet, when she looked at his face, she found no mockery there. His eyes were serious, sincere, filled with a quiet strength that made her chest tighten. Her mind raced. She thought of the morning, of standing in front of people who judged her worth by whether a man accepted her or not. She thought of walking away in shame, of sitting on this bench alone with no future in sight. And now this man, this stranger, was asking her to walk into his life, not as someone broken, but as someone needed. She shook her head slowly, disbelief painted across her face. You don't know me. How can you say that? The man did not flinch. His voice was calm. You are right. I don't know all of your story. But I have watched you in these few moments. I saw the way you held my daughter's doll, the way you smiled when my son spoke. You carry kindness even when your own heart is heavy. That is what my children need. Not perfection, not wealth, just kindness. The woman swallowed hard. Tears blurred her vision, not from pain this time, but from the weight of his words. She felt as if the world had suddenly offered her a hand after pushing her down so cruelly. Yet fear lingered. Her heart had just been broken. How could she trust another man so soon? I can't, she whispered. I am broken. I was left because I wasn't good enough. How can I be good for your children? The man leaned forward slightly, his expression steady. Listen to me. Someone leaving you does not mean you are not good enough. It means they could not see your worth. But I see it. My children see it. And I believe you have more love in you than you realize. She looked at him, her lips trembling, unsure whether to believe. His children ran back to the bench at that moment, holding her hands without hesitation. Come with us, the little girl said with a smile, as if repeating her father's wish without knowing its depth. The woman's heart pounded. The simplicity of the child's request tore down walls she had built around herself. It wasn't just the man's words anymore. It was the way his children already accepted her, as if they had known her all their life. Still, doubt clung tightly. She turned her gaze to the ground. What about your family? What about what people will say? You can't just bring home a stranger from the station. The man sighed, his face reflecting years of carrying burdens alone. People will always talk. They spoke when I lost my wife. They spoke when I raised these twins on my own. But I have learned that people's words cannot feed my children or comfort them at night. What matters is what I choose for them. And I choose someone who can love them. I see that in you. His words struck her like a gentle storm, soft but powerful, shaking loose the doubts in her heart. She wanted to argue, but no words came. She glanced at the twins again. Their innocent eyes held no judgment, only hope. For them, life was simple. If they liked her, they wanted her near. And somehow they already liked her. The woman closed her eyes for a moment, her breath uneven. She thought of returning to her parents' home, facing the whispers, the pity, the endless shame. She thought of living in loneliness, carrying the label of a rejected bride. Then she thought of the children's small hands holding hers, of their laughter echoing in her ears, of the man's steady gaze promising not perfection, but a chance to be wanted again. Her chest ached with conflict. I don't know if I can do this, she said softly. You don't have to decide today, the man replied gently. All I ask is that you walk with us now. Let my children see you smile again. Let them feel you near. The rest, we can see with time. His patience calmed her storm. He was not demanding, not forcing. He was simply offering. And for a woman who had been thrown aside like she was nothing, this offer felt like the beginning of healing. The twins leaned into her, one on each side, their tiny arms wrapping around her waist. Please, the boy said, his voice small but firm. We don't have a mama, but we like you. That simple statement pierced the last wall around her heart. She could no longer hold back the tears. They streamed down her face, but this time they were not tears of rejection. They were tears of being wanted, of being seen. She bent forward, hugging the children tightly, her shoulders shaking as they clung to her in return. The man watched, his own eyes misting. For years he had carried the weight of being both parents, praying for someone who could love his children as he did. Now before him he saw a woman who might just be the answer. Not because she was flawless, but because she understood pain. And from pain came the ability to give deep love. The station around them continued its noise, trains arriving, whistles blowing, people rushing. But in that small circle of a man, a woman and 2 children, the world felt different. A bond had formed, fragile yet powerful, born from loss but growing into hope. The woman looked up at the man through her tears. Her voice trembled, but there was a quiet strength in it. "I will walk with you, for now." The man gave a slow, grateful nod. His heart eased, knowing that sometimes the smallest step could lead to the greatest journey. The twins cheered, pulling at her hands as if afraid she would change her mind. She stood, her dress brushing against the dusty floor, but for once she did not feel ashamed of it. She felt instead like she had been chosen again, not by someone who turned away, but by someone who believed she was enough. And so, as the evening sun dipped lower, the rejected bride rose from the station bench, no longer a symbol of sorrow but of a new beginning. With a child on each side and a man walking beside her, she took her first steps into an unexpected story, unsure of where it would lead, but certain that she was no longer alone. The woman walked beside the man and his twins, her steps unsure but steady. She had agreed to go with them, but inside her heart there was a storm of thoughts. Every sound of her wedding dress brushing against the floor reminded her of what had happened that morning. She still felt the weight of rejection pressing on her chest, but now something new pressed against it too. Uncertainty about the path she was stepping into. The twins held her hands tightly, one on each side as if they had known her for years. Their small palms were warm, their grip full of innocence and trust. She glanced down at them and wondered how children could give such acceptance so quickly, without knowing her past, without caring about the shame that others would see. For them, she was not a rejected bride. She was simply a woman who smiled at them, who held their hands when they asked. Yet doubt filled her mind. She asked herself over and over, what am I doing? I don't even know this man. I don't know where he lives, what his life is like, or what will happen if I walk further with him. Her fear whispered that maybe she was walking into another mistake, another heartbreak. The man walked quietly beside her, giving her space. He didn't press her with more words. He let the children chatter, let their laughter cover the silence, and let her thoughts wander without interruption. That silence itself felt strange to her. She had lived all day in noise, noise of judgment, noise of whispers, noise of cruel words. Now there was quiet, and in that quiet she could hear her own heart more clearly. The twins pulled her forward excitedly, showing her the shops, the food stalls, the small things that caught their eyes. "Look, Papa, sweets," the boy exclaimed, and the girl giggled as she pointed at a balloon vendor. Their joy was pure and contagious. The woman found herself smiling softly at their excitement, even though her heart was heavy. The man noticed her small smile and spoke gently. "You don't need to decide everything today. All you need to do is take one step at a time." She looked at him, her brows furrowed. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice low. His reply was simple. "So am I. But courage is not living without fear. It is walking even when fear is beside you." His words settled in her heart. She knew he wasn't saying them lightly. His face carried the marks of struggle. He was not offering her a fairy tale. He was offering her a chance at something real, something that would require courage from both of them. As they walked out of the station, the cool evening air touched her face. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful, but she could not enjoy it fully. Her mind was still restless. "What will my parents say if they find out?" she thought. "What will society think? Will they call me foolish again? Will they laugh at me for choosing to walk with a stranger?" These thoughts burned inside her, pulling her heart in 2 directions. One side wanted to run back to the safety of the familiar, even if it meant shame and whispers. The other side wanted to keep walking, to trust this man's steady voice and the children's innocent hands. She squeezed the twins' hands gently, and they looked up at her with wide smiles. Their eyes seemed to say without words, "Don't leave us. We like you." And in that moment she felt something she hadn't felt all day. Needed. Her rejection at the altar had made her feel worthless, like no one wanted her. But here, in the eyes of two children, she saw a different truth. Maybe she was not worthless. Maybe she was simply in the wrong place earlier with the wrong person. Still, fear lingered. "I don't know if I can be what you expect," she told the man quietly. "I'm not strong. I feel weak. I feel like I've lost everything." He shook his head. "You don't need to be strong all the time. You just need to care. That is enough for my children. That is enough for me." Her throat tightened. She was not used to hearing such words. All her life, people had measured her by what she could provide, what image she could keep, what role she could fulfill. No one had told her that just caring was enough. They reached a small tea stall near the station. The man ordered tea for himself and milk for the twins. He asked if she wanted anything, but she shook her head, still too overwhelmed. The children sipped their drinks happily, swinging their legs on the bench. The man drank slowly, his gaze steady on her but not pressing. She watched him quietly. He was not a man of polished looks or fine clothes. His shirt was worn, his shoes dusty, his hands rough from hard work. But there was something about him that spoke of honesty. He did not try to hide his struggles, nor did he try to impress her. He was simply himself, and that made her feel safe. The twins offered her their biscuits, insisting she take one. She accepted, not because she was hungry, but because refusing their innocent gift felt wrong. As she ate slowly, she realized how strange and yet how natural this moment was. Sharing a small meal with children she had just met, with a man whose name she still did not know, and yet feeling more peace than she had felt in months. After a while, the man spoke again, his voice low and steady. "I know this feels sudden. I know it feels too much. But life doesn't always follow the plans we make. Sometimes it gives us a path we never imagined. I don't want to force you. I only want you to know that with us you will never be unwanted again." Her eyes filled with tears. The word unwanted cut deep because that was exactly how she had felt all day. Unwanted, abandoned, left behind. His words offered a promise she hardly dared to believe. She whispered softly, "But what if I fail? What if I cannot love them the way they deserve?" The man looked at his children, then back at her. "Love is not measured by perfection. It is measured by trying. If you try even when you are afraid, that is already love." The twins leaned against her shoulders, their little heads resting on her arms. Their trust was so complete, so natural, that she felt her doubts trembling. How could children trust so quickly when adults doubted so much? Maybe children saw the heart more clearly than grown-ups did. As the night deepened, she found herself caught between fear and hope. Fear told her that she might regret this decision, that she might face more pain, but hope whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something she had always longed for. A family that truly wanted her. Not for appearances, not for dowry or expectations, but for her heart. When they finally stood to leave, the man asked gently, "Will you walk further with us?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. She still didn't have all the answers. She still carried doubt, but she also carried something new inside her, a small flame of belonging. And that flame was enough to take another step forward. So she walked on, her dress rustling softly, the twins holding her hands tightly, and the man walking steadily beside her. She was still scared, but she was also needed. And sometimes being needed was enough to fight the fear. The night had grown darker, and the stars slowly appeared above the town. The woman walked alongside the man and his children, still unsure but no longer alone. The twins held her hands as though they were afraid she might slip away. Their grip was strong for such small hands, and she felt their trust sinking deep into her heart. Every step she took with them felt like leaving her past a little further behind. When they reached the man's modest home, she paused outside. It was not large or grand, just a small house with a simple gate, but there was warmth in its lights. She hesitated at the door, her fears rushing back. She wondered again if she was making a mistake, if she would regret stepping inside. But then the little girl tugged her hand and said, "Come in, please. We want you here." The woman swallowed hard. It had been a long day filled with rejection, shame, and questions about her worth. Now a child was asking her to enter, not because of duty or expectation, but out of pure want. She stepped inside, her heart beating fast. The home was simple but neat. The walls carried pictures of the twins, some with the man, none with their mother. The absence of the mother was silent but heavy. The woman noticed it immediately and felt a quiet ache for the children who had grown without a mother's presence. She realized now why the man had spoken those words to her at the station. His children did not just need care, they needed someone to bring back the gentle touch of a mother. The twins rushed around, showing her their toys, their drawings, and their little treasures collected from the world outside. She listened carefully, smiling at their excitement, and in those moments she forgot her sorrow for a while. The man watched quietly, his eyes softening as he saw his children laugh more freely than usual. It had been a long time since he had seen that kind of lightness in them. Later, when the twins were tucked into bed, they begged her to stay in their room until they fell asleep. She sat on the edge of the bed holding the doll the girl had given her earlier, while telling them a simple story about a bird that had lost its way but found a new nest. Her voice was soft, and the children listened with wide eyes until their breathing grew slow and steady. She tucked the blanket around them gently, her heart heavy with emotion. She felt as though life had handed her a second chance in the form of two children who already trusted her without question. When she returned to the small living room, the man was waiting quietly. He offered her tea, and she accepted. For a long moment they sat in silence, both lost in thought. Finally, she broke the silence. "This feels so sudden. This morning I thought my life had ended. Now I am here in a stranger's home with two children who call me near. I don't know what to make of it." The man nodded. "I know it is sudden, but sometimes life changes in one day. Sometimes it takes everything from us, and sometimes it gives back more than we imagined." She lowered her eyes, holding the cup carefully in her hands. "I am afraid I will fail them." "I am afraid I will fail you." The man shook his head gently. "You don't need to be perfect. Just be yourself. My children don't need someone flawless. They need someone who will stay, someone who will care. That is all." His words touched her deeply. She had spent her whole life trying to meet expectations, to be worthy in the eyes of others. But here was a man telling her that simply being herself was enough. It was both terrifying and comforting. The next morning, sunlight poured through the small windows. She woke up to the sound of the twins running through the house, their laughter filling the air. It was a sound she hadn't heard in her own home for a long time. She stepped into the kitchen where the man was preparing a simple breakfast. He looked up and smiled faintly, not with the excitement of a new romance, but with the quiet relief of someone who had carried burdens for too long and finally found someone to share them with. The twins rushed to her, tugging at her dress. "Will you eat with us?" they asked eagerly. She nodded, her throat tightening. Sitting at that table with them, she felt like she was part of something she thought she had lost forever. Over the next days, she continued to struggle with her doubts. At night, when the house was quiet, she still thought of her family, her neighbors, and the whispers that might spread when they learned where she had gone. She still wondered if she had been foolish, if she was moving too quickly. But each morning, when the children woke up and ran to her with open arms, her doubts softened. Every time they called her to sit with them, to play, to listen, she felt her worth return piece by piece. She noticed the little things the man did too, the way he made sure the children were never without what they needed, the way he carried his exhaustion quietly, the way he gave her space without forcing her to decide too soon. He was not perfect, but he was steady. He was not a man of promises. He was a man of actions, and that steadiness began to build trust in her heart. One evening, after a long day, the man sat across from her and spoke softly. "I don't expect you to stay if you don't want to, but I will tell you this. If you choose to walk away, you will take with you two hearts that already love you." The words pierced her soul. She realized then that her decision was no longer just about herself. It was about two children who had found comfort in her presence, about a man who had dared to hope again, and about a chance to build something new from the ruins of her broken past. She thought back to the station, to the moment she had been sitting alone in her wrinkled wedding dress, feeling like her life was over. And then she thought of now, of two children tugging her hands and calling her near. The difference was like night and day. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "I don't want to leave." The man looked at her, his eyes softening. "Then don't," he said simply. The children, overhearing from the hallway, rushed in and wrapped their arms around her. "You will stay? You will be with us?" they asked with wide, hopeful eyes. She pulled them close, holding them tightly. For the first time since her rejection, she didn't feel unwanted. She didn't feel broken. She felt chosen, not by one man at an altar, but by two little hearts who needed her and a man who saw her worth. That night, as she lay in bed, she realized she was no longer the woman who had been left behind. She was a woman who had been found by a family who needed her, found by children who loved her without conditions, found by a man who saw her heart and not her past. The station, once the place of her deepest sorrow, had become the beginning of her new life. And though she didn't know what challenges the future would bring, she knew one thing for certain: she was no longer alone.